Hello and welcome to the Union Pacific Railroad Geneva Subdivision. This is another operations video that I put together on intermodal action on the Geneva Sub. This particular train that we're going to be looking at is train ITAAH5. I is for intermodal, TA is for Tacoma, Washington, AH is for Ashland Yard, and 5 is because there's so many of these trains between the two sites that this is the fifth train of the day, I guess. Decided to do another operations video. I was going to do an update on the intermodal yard, but thought, well, it might be better to do an operations video and get a chance to show some of the new things on the Global 3, some of the updates there, and also show another operations video, which seems to be, pretty popular. One thing that you might notice is a little bit different about this video is I do have the throttle screen, so you can kind of follow along on the throttle work that's being done as we operate these trains. This is the screen that's on my smartphone. This is not my phone that I use every day. It's just a phone that has a cracked screen, but I use it for this operations on the Geneva Sub. It's a JMRI throttle that works through an app called Engine Driver by Steve Todd. Real nice guy, and really does a great job on this particular video, or excuse me, on this particular app that works quite well with operating model trains. As you can see on the throttle, I'm kind of slowing things down. This train is coming out of the staging yard, and the first turn it went around Clinton, and then it went across the Mississippi River, passed through Franklin Grove, and now is slowing down as it approaches Global 3. You can kind of see part of the yard here. And as you can see, it's crossing over from track 1 to track 2, and then to get into the Global 3 yard, it's crossing over again from track 2 onto the yard lead of the intermodal yard at Global 3. We have a train waiting, an auto rack had to stop for the intermodal train. There are 4 classification tracks at Global 3. The train is going into classification track 1. It's, I guess you could also say, the arrival departure track, but it can also be used as a classification track. So there's 4 classification tracks, and then there's 2 additional tracks for loading and unloading containers. And here you see it pulling into the yard. This is the east end of the yard. You can see the tail end of the auto rack train, and then some of the new things that have been put into the engine facilities. I have a couple of employees of mine and manning the fueling apparatus, getting the locomotives ready for their journey out. These 3 particular locomotives that are pulling in 4848, I believe it is, and 48247 and 4828, I believe. I can't really read those. The lead locomotive, though, is 4848, and you can see that in the throttle as I'm continuing to decrease the throttle setting. To move the throttle up and down, I use the volume switches, the volume buttons. You can also touch the screen. Now, when I touch the screen, it won't show up. This is just a screen capture. But we have arrived now at Global 3 and pulled all the way into the yard. And we have the brakeman's uncoupled to the trains. Now, as you can see on the throttle, I'm acquiring 4528, which is the last locomotive. I'm going to swipe up here to be able to turn the light on. We're uncoupling from the train, so we need to, for safety reasons, make sure that the headlights are turned on both ends. And then we're up in the throttle again to pull ahead of the train, and we're going to be back in these locomotives into the engine facilities. Before I swiped up and removed the panels, there are, through this JMRI app, I can pull up panels that have the turnouts and also little dots for signal indication, so I can act as my own dispatcher and throw turnouts and set signals and be able to run the layout by myself. Okay, so if you notice the direction is east and west. This app is very configurable. So if you get it, when you first get it, instead of saying east and west, it says forward and reverse. If you notice, there's a F and an R still in those buttons. But anyway, for directions, I can press east or west because on the layout, looking at the layout, you're looking north, and so east is to the left, and west is to the left, and east is to the right. Alright, so here we are very slowly pulling into the engine facilities. Don't want to run into any of our employees there. This sanding facility is a Bachmann model. I like it a lot. Looks pretty cool. But I hope to eventually change the ladders out and the railings out for etched metal ladders and railings. But I have so much to do on the layout, so many different areas to work on. It's one of those things that I'm gonna, come back to it when I get time and make additional improvements. Hopefully that will in fact happen someday. All right, so we're all tied up here at the engine facilities. Alright, with the engines all set in the engine facilities, now we have a couple of switchers, yard crew that will come along, and we're going to be picking up 2 cars and dropping off 2 cars. Now, since we're in the yard here, the auto racks can continue on their westward trek. Looks like we're going to have a little bit of a race here to start off with. One of the things I really want to do next on the intermodal yard here is get the check-in booth under the kind of like pavilion thing. Put in the details of the computer screens, and there's like some posts that need to go in, some yellow posts to protect the trucks from running into the brick columns, and some guard rails to let the trucks, to stop the trucks and then let them through, and so that doesn't look like just an empty pavilion there. Definitely have to put a lot of details there. I did order some more concrete barriers from Shapeways. I got them from a different person this time, so we'll see how those look. But anyway, the first thing we're going to do is with the the yard engines here, we're going to be pulling them back so that our teammates and 2 other yard switchers will now couple on to the front end of the trains. I had to pull it back a little bit so that these switchers could clear and couple to the front. The 2 that are being dropped off are 2 cars that are at the head end of this train, and so we're going to drop off from this end. So it's not this first group, but the second set of well cars, the K lines there, 5 cars, a 5 well car there, 10 containers altogether. That's one of the cars that gets dropped off. And then second set of cars is the hub group, the green hub group containers there, and the AOK cars, the brown set there. So we're going to pull up a little bit, and then we'll be uncoupling. The MyJack cranes there that transfer the containers from the well cars to the trucks, the truck chassis. Those are Walther's kits, and those are another case where at some point in time I'm gonna go back and replace the handrails and ladders with etched metal handrails and ladders. But for now, I'm gonna just have it as is and move on to the next area. And at some point in time, I'll come back and kind of make those additional details. Alright, so we're gonna back these 2 cars that we're dropping off. Looks like it's going into track classification track 3. One small detail that you might notice is that I actually put doors into the engine facilities. For the longest time, that engine house just had cut out little openings for the doors. I actually glued the doors in there and painted them. Kind of makes a difference. Kind of did a little bit of work on the machine, the maintenance shop there for the chassis and trucks, which is the smaller of the 2 buildings. So we got both of those dropped off. Didn't take very long. And we'll set the first group there back with the rest of the train. Didn't really need to push it so far forward here, but sometimes the yard crew gets a little over-ambitious. More than far enough. Alright, so we got the 2 cars dropped off, and we'll go ahead and add the 2 cars onto the back of the train, so the other yard crew will take care of that end. When we have an operating session with a group, usually we'll have 2 guys work Global 3. As you can see, you can have 2 people running each set of yard engines. Usually they also, the 2 that do Global 3 also take care of the BNSF switcher in Rochelle. Alright, so now we'll go ahead and couple on to the back end of the train and see if we can add cars. And sometimes you have to line up the couplers in order for them to couple. We dropped off 2. We're going to be picking up 3. So this train is going to be a little bit longer when we're done with it. As we're working this train, you can see a manifest train going through. The lead engine there is, I don't know if you can see, is one of the heritage units, the CNW Heritage unit. That's the only Heritage unit I have, and I thought it was fitting to get that one since this Geneva Subdivision was the Geneva Subdivision of the Chicago Northwestern before the Union Pacific took over the CNW. Alright, so we're going to be, as I said, picking up 3 cars. This set of 5 here is one set that we're going to be picking up. The UMAX containers we are not going to be picking up, so those are going to be staying. And then this hub group containers here we will be picking up. Now those look a lot like the ones that we just dropped off, but they are two different cars. Those are Deluxe Innovations well cars. They look very nice. I bought 2 sets of them, and then the containers are scale trains containers, which look very nice. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to add the hub group AOK. Put that set on there first, and then we'll put the UMAX containers back, and then the other one that we need to pick up, you can see one of the cars there. It's the trailer on the very right hand side of the screen there, the TTX with a trailer in a container well car. Those are Atlas well cars that have the trailer hitches. Those are pretty nice cars also. I have 3 of them. I kind of run them together as a single car, just to simplify things a little bit. Usually when I uncouple cars, it goes pretty quickly. In this particular case, I am struggling quite a bit. Nope, still don't have it. The uncoupling device I have there is a old paintbrush with a sprue for micro trains uncouplers, the old 1025s. Kind of use that to fashion a uncoupling device. I have about 4 or 5 of them. Alright, so we're going to put the the UMAX containers back. See if I can do a little bit. Oh, much better that time. So this will look a lot better once I get all the concrete barriers in and some details. I definitely need a lot of details at the checkout and check-in booths there. That'll make a big difference. The cross arms will definitely help, and they have little kind of like ATM-like machines that the truck drivers check in with, so I'll have to kind of model that somehow. Alright, so we're fetching those trailers in the well cars now. See if we can't pull those out. There should be 3 of them. Alright, so it's those 3 that I need to pick up. There we go. As you notice, I also put the chain link fence in for the pavement area there. I have to be kind of careful now as I put more things down. When I reach over To uncouple, I have to be much more careful not to bump the stuff that I have on the layout, obviously. That trailer crane there, I'm trying to think of what that's called. Somebody had told me before, I couldn't think of what it was. But anyway, that's a real nice, not really a kit, comes assembled already. It was pretty expensive, but I didn't buy it. Some gentleman that operated with me and Rochelle actually bought that and gave it to me to put on the layout, since he enjoyed working this yard so much. He wanted to have that on the yard and said I could keep it as part of Global 3. Looks like we have a tank train going through. Alright, so we have the well cars on there now. And the last thing we have to do is put these green, I think those are EMP containers, put those back. And then we'll attach the last three sets, the last set of the three cars onto the train. And then it'll be almost ready for departure. As you notice on the background here, I use some photos for the background. The farm that's right there with a barn, that's not a photo, and then you can kind of see the farm in the background. That's a picture that I just scoured the internet and found a picture that worked out pretty good. It's got some cornfields in the foreground and the farm in the background. So I cut that out and used that. And then down the line a little bit, there's another picture of a farm. That was actually a backdrop that I purchased from a company that I can't remember what the name of the company is right now. But that was a purchased backdrop. They both look really good. One little problem is that the angle on the two of them is not the same. So it looks, if you look at both of them together, it looks a little bit odd, but if you look at each one separately, they each look good on their own. Used quite a few photos. The photo between the two, so between the trees there, that I actually took that one myself. I went out to the cornfields in Rochelle, was on an overpass that went over the trains, but it was what I used for the picture because it got me high enough so that I could get a picture of the cornfields looking down at them. Alright, there's one more car we need to drop off here. This last car also needs to be dropped. Hey, it looks like a excursion train going by. What do you know? That is a Challenger going by with an excursion train. I have two excursion trains. That's one of the two. That's the Challenger. Don't see that very often on the layout, but I do run it every once in a while just for fun. And you could hear it. The one thing I don't like, that's the one locomotive I have that has sound. And one thing I don't like about sound is that you can be here in Global 3 and you can hear it all the way in the staging yards, almost even in the next room, which represents hundreds of miles away, or even 20 miles away, and you can hear it very well. So the sound does not scale very well, I don't think. At least that's been my experience with sound on the layout. But maybe they just need to turn the volume down. Alright, since we added some extra length to the train, and we're going to be still have 70 miles to go to Ashland Yard from here. And there is a pretty good grade just east of here, what's called the Creston Hill. Now, if you're driving along the highway, you can't tell that there's a hill. This part of the country is very flat, but there is a pretty, probably one of the steepest hills, and on the Geneva sub is just east of Rochelle. So anyway, we're going to be throwing on a DPU unit on the back end of the train, so that the train will have a little bit of help getting completing its run to Chicago and making up the hill, the crested hill just east of Rochelle. All right, looks like the train is all together. We're going to pull it back a little bit so that the locomotives can latch on to the front of the train. Hope you've enjoyed this part of the video. This is part 1 of the video. There will be part 2, which will be latching on the locomotives again and heading the rest of the way on the Geneva sub eastbound. Hope you've enjoyed the video. Stay tuned for part 2 coming up on Sunday.